And Shabbat Shalom, fellow saints of the Most High. Welcome to the Messianic Torah Observer's Sabbath Thoughts and Reflections. I'm Rod Thomas, and I want to thank you for fellowshipping with me here on this blessed day of rest. And as always, it is our hope, trust, and prayer here on the Messianic Torah Observer that this installment finds you, your families, and fellowships well and blessed. Let's open in prayer. Father, thank you so much for this week that has come and has now gone. Thank you for this wonderful day of rest, this gift of Sabbath. Thank you for your word, and thank you for the walking, talking word. Your walking, talking Torah, our older brother, our master, and soon coming King, Yehoshua, Messiah. Thank you for his sacrifice. Thank you for his intercessory work in the heavenly Mishkan. Thank you for your covenant relationship with us and your love for us, your plan of salvation, restoration, and redemption. And now, Father, as we turn to this day of rest, we ask that you open up our eyes to see and ears to hear the things you have for us, and give us hearts that are pliable to be obedient, and our minds receiving to receive those things that you have for us, to understand, and a will to act out those things that you have for us to do. Bless those in our faith, Father, who are experiencing oppression, tribulation, difficulties. Meet them where they are, Father. Give them wisdom, give them knowledge, give them resources, give them strength. Build up their faith, Father, where it is lacking. Help us, Father, to understand how we can each be of help to those who are in need. Work with us, Father, in the ministries you've given us. Help us, Father, to work through those things and to glorify you here on the earth in the midst of this corrupt and dying world. We love you, Father, and we give you praise and look forward to the great things you have in store for us as we sit at your feet and feast on your word. Hallelujah. This Sabbath Torah reading is found in Genesis chapter 12. Genesis chapter 12 this week, beginning at verse 1, and it goes all the way through chapter 13, verse 18. It's actually chapters 12 and 13. And I've chosen to title this discussion, "The Abrahamic Covenant Holds the Key to God's Plan of Salvation." And this is the 10th Torah reading for the 3-year Torah reading cycle. That key that is derived from the Abrahamic Covenant that unlocks the plan of salvation for us, we will find in our discussion here today, is something that we've been incessantly talking about over the course of the last year or so of this program. And that is a trusting, obedient relationship with the Most High. Faith and obedience. And today's post will be a shorter than most, as we've already posted a Sabbath Thoughts and Reflections installment earlier this week on the topic of Hanukkah. So I don't want to keep you any longer than I actually have to today. So you're in for a blessing. And if you've not had the opportunity to read or listen to that installment, I will put the link to that post in this week's transcript for your convenience. Now, as in our previous Sabbath Thoughts and Reflections post, I will be reading from the Robert Alter translation of Torah. It's entitled The 5 Books of Moses. I'm not really a fan of that title, but that's what Robert Alter chose to entitle his book. And for purposes of today's discussion, which is the reason why it's going to be shorter than most, is that we will be restricting or confining our reading to just the first 5 verses of the entire reading. So let's begin. Genesis chapter 12, beginning at verse 1. And it reads, And Jehovah said to Avram, or Abram, Go forth from your land and your birthplace and your father's house to the land I will show you. Verse 2. And I will make you a great nation, and I will bless you. That is, with all goodness, I will bless you. I will grant unto you. I will lavish upon you goodness. And he continues talking to Abram. He says, and make your name great. Avram, I'm going to make your name great, and you shall be a blessing. In other words, you're going to be a blessing to humanity as a result of the goodness, the righteousness of Yah that manifests in and from you as a result of your obedience of faith. So you're going to be a great nation. I'm going to bless you. And I'm going to make your name great, and you shall be a blessing. Verse 3, And I will bless those who bless you. Those who come after you, Avram, will enjoy my favor, the favor that I've shed upon you. They will enjoy that favor, that same flavor, that favor. And those who damn you, I will curse, and all the clans of the earth through you shall be blessed. Verse 4. And Avram went forth as Jehovah had spoken to him. That is, without question, Avram obeyed Yah. He got up and left. He collected his things. He collected his belongings, his family. And he set sail out. Well, he pulled up his tent stakes and went his way. And Lot went forth with him. And Avram being 75 years old when he left Haran. Verse 5, our last verse. And Avram took Sarai, his wife, and Lot his nephew, and all the goods they had gotten, and the folk they had bought in Haran. And they set out on the way to the land of Canaan, and they came to the land of Canaan. Here, Avram becomes the main individual focus of the Genesis storyline. Whereas in the previous chapter and verses, he was simply a footnote of Shem's genealogy. Back over in Genesis chapter 11. Avram here is essentially the first official patriarch of the true faith once delivered. For here in this opening verse, it is Jehovah, Yahweh Yahuwah, however you declare his name, who appears to him. Now, how he appears to Avram is not spelled out in the text, but clearly Abba manifests himself to Avram in a very personal, indirect way, not in a dream or vision, as he does most, but he does so to Avram in a clear, impersonal way. And that appearance was unprovoked by Avram, if you will, by anything specific that Avram had done, which suggests to me that Avram was selected, or he was chosen of Jehovah to be the father of a new creation of people, a new nation of people who would be set apart for all humanity, or from all humanity, I should say. And as a special people, a special possession unto him, Jehovah. Now, the text does not reveal anything that Avram says in response to Jehovah's words here and in instructions. This was big deal. These first 3 verses are the Abrahamic Covenant. And this is historic. Historic. For this is the very basis upon which the plan of salvation was based. The other great epochs in human history upon which the plan of salvation rests is back in the garden when he says to Eve, your seed will crush the head of the serpent. Boom. Number 1, bam. Number 2 that comes to mind readily is Noah being saved from the great flood. And he and his family are protected in the ark. And they overcome the great flood. And then here we have Avram, a single man who now takes on the mantle of the plan of salvation. Oh, it's so great. It's so inspiring. But the text does not reveal anything that Avram says in response to this momentous occasion. Avram's words are instead manifested, and this is the beauty of it, manifested in Avram's unquestioning obedience to the Creator's instructions. Are you catching what I'm thinking and reflecting here on these 5 verses? Not a word is spoken, or at least not that the text mentions. I'm sure there were words exchanged in his preparation to leave Ur of the Chaldees and journey across some estimates of 900 miles, ultimately to the land where he settled. But in response to Abba's covenant with him, that unilateral covenant that he just made, the unconditional covenant that he made with Abraham, not a word, just obedience, and obedience of faith. He believed in the person of Yah. He believed not just Yah's words, but he believed him. And in believing him, the only thing that you really can do that's of any significance is to obey. Sometimes that's the way it is in the kingdom economy. Some of the greatest things is that when you get an instruction or leading or guidance from the eternal, the best thing to do is not open your mouth, but to just do it. To just do it. At this early juncture in the storyline, Avram is not told where he was to go. Nothing. Just go. I'm going to show you where you need to go. So you need to pack up your things and get your family together, and you need to go, and I'm going to show you where I need you to go. And Avram's obedience here speaks, as my dear friend Robert Bills says often, speaks volumes. It speaks so many volumes as to Avram's trusting faith in Yah. Not just in the words of him or of Yah, of Elohim, but also trusting faith in the very being, the very person of Yehovah. That same miraculous trusting faith will be manifested later on in Abrahamic storyline when he is called upon by Yah to offer up his son Yitzhak, Isaac, as a sacrifice. Coming up here in chapter 22 of Genesis. But here, Avram is instructed by Yehovah to separate himself entirely from the life that he knew as a son of Terah, or Terak, or Terah in pagan evil Ur of the Chaldees. Ur of the Chaldees in Mesopotamia. And Yah's instructions could not be more clear and precise. Leave your land, leave your birthplace, and leave your daddy's house and go to a place I will show you, period. Case closed. Just go. These instructions, as described by J.H. Hertz in his Torah Haftarah commentary, are, quote, the main influences which mold a person's thoughts and actions, end quote, in life. Your land, your birthplace, your daddy's home. Virtually in ancient Near East, it was everything to an individual to give up everything and follow Yah. Where have we heard that before? Take up your execution stake, take up your stake and follow me. Our master said that to his disciples, as he has said it to us across 2,000 years of history. And so Avram responds to these instructions with simple, trusting obedience. This is the foundation upon which a covenant relationship with the creator of the universe is built. Yah sets the terms, and we in response obey without question. Certainly not an easy thing for any rational human to have to experience, but it has to be done. And let us not be blind to the fact that this abrupt, powerful instruction given by Yah to Avram was the very start of a series of tests that the Eternal would bring upon Avram. He was being instructed by Yah to completely cut himself off from all that he knew growing up and living as a younger adult before the call. And certainly this is not in the least an aberration of history. And I say that because each of us who are called to faith are instructed to spiritually do the very same thing Avram was being instructed of Yah to do. This is especially underscored in the renewed covenant, as we are called to die to self, to abandon our former life with all the baggage therein, and walk in his footstep, walk in our master's footsteps, as he leads us to a land and introduces us to a life of his making. The life that his daddy taught him to tell or teach us. And the thing he requires of us, I'm speaking of Abba, as he did Avram, is to trust him and to obey him. And when this circuit is complete, we enter into and operate in covenant relationship with the creator of the universe. There is no higher calling than that in this realm, in this life, on this planet, in this universe. No other greater calling to be chosen for this auspicious occasion. Like Avram, we don't know starting off where we're going or what life is going to be like from that point moving forward. But our trust in Yah is all we need to function. He's going to take care of all the rest. He's going to provide for us. He's going to protect us. He's going to guide us. And so we have here in our reading the beginning of a new nation of peoples, starting with just a single man of faith. A single man of faith who obeys. And from this single man of faith who obeys would emerge a nation that would become a light to the world, a light to the nations. Isaiah chapter 42, verse 6. And the Holman Christian Study Bible reads, I, Jehovah, have called you for a righteous purpose, and I will hold you by your hand. I will keep you and appoint you to be a covenant for the people and a light to the nations. Hallelujah. Has Yisrael always excelled in this calling? This was speaking of Israel. Let's be open and honest about this. This was speaking of Israel, and by extension, us spiritually. But let's just focus on the direct linkage here in the Isaiah passage. He's speaking of Yisrael. And has Yisrael always excelled in this calling of being a light to the nations, a light to the peoples of the world? No. More times than not, she has faltered in her call. And we've talked about this, especially in our series within a series, A Question of One's Jewishness. And if you're so interested and you have not had the opportunity to listen to or read those posts, that series, I believe, of 4 or 5 posts, I would invite you to do so, and I'll put the links to the transcripts of that post. Part 1, putting all 5 would be a little cumbersome, but I'll put at least part 1 there, and then you can jump from part 1 to 2 to 3 and so on. Let me make a note to do that, because I do tend to make these promises and forget to do them. Okay. Here we go. So, but continuing on here, but Yah will always be shown to be true in these cases. Even in the case of Yisrael's faltering and being a light to the world, he will always be found to be true. He said here, I'm going to make you a light to the nations. And people will look and say Israel failed in that assignment. Well, somewhat, yes, but Father, still, what he says comes to fruition. What he says is true. And every man is a liar from that point forward. Because despite Yisrael's failures at times to be a light to the world, Yah has always maintained unto himself a remnant. We talked about that in our Righteousness of God series. In specific, the Habakkuk passage of Habakkuk chapter 2, verse 4, where Father says, the righteous shall live by their faith. There's always a righteous remnant whose light has shined ever so brightly for the world to see. Yah, in the end, will always receive the glory and honor he so justly deserves. And what he says will come to fruition always. In comparison to man, who is always seen to be a liar. And maybe the better term instead of liar is will always be found to be not faithful. Not faithful. Not carrying out what he himself has set out to do or have been given the task to do. How about that? And so all the families of the earth have been blessed through Avram's seeds possessing and living and teaching of Yah's holy and righteous oracles. But even more so, the families of the earth are blessed through the seed of the woman, as recorded in Genesis chapter 3, verse 15. Coming down through then the lineage of Noah and on to Avram, ultimately coming on the scene and crushing the serpent's head and making unto humanity a way to become sons and daughters of Jehovah Elohim. What a beautiful, beautiful plan. Despite Yah's people having issues from time to time, Yah has a way of still making lemonade out of lemons. What an amazing God we serve. What a mighty God we serve. Oh, just amazing. But what we have here in the story of Avram and this Abrahamic covenant is essentially the gospel, the good news of the coming kingdom of Jehovah. It is the good news of the kingdom of Jehovah. Indeed, despite the work of the enemy and the evil that seemed to dominate the world at the time, Yah was announcing that he was indeed getting the band back together. What I mean by that is the first announcement of the coming kingdom of Yah to the earth and to humanity, in a sense. And this gospel message would be inaugurated through a single man from Ur of the Chaldees, or Chaldees as some pronounce it. And this single man of Ur of the Chaldees, or from Ur of the Chaldees, was none other than Avram, or Abram. Soon to be his name changed to Abraham, or Avraham, if you want to try it in Hebrew. Another interesting history, spiritual parallel, if you will, to be drawn from our reading here is that with Yah's instructions to Avram and the establishing of his unconditional covenant with Avram, Avram would live the remainder of his life as a pilgrim, a wanderer of sorts, a sojourner, despite Yah granting him title deed to the land of promise, which is Canaan. He himself would not fully realize, speaking of Avram here, he wouldn't fully realize that possession apart from implication and promise. A promise that existed as though it was an existing reality. That's how the economy of the kingdom works for us. We're being promised, like Avram, we're called to dwell in this world as though we are sojourners. And we're called to sojourn in this land, because to remain attached to this world, such as attached to unconverted friends and families and the old way of life we've come from, while being called to walk in a covenant relationship with the Creator is but a fool's errand at best. It could never work out. And Abba knows this. And he has told us that this world is not our home. And this is best illustrated or actually dwelt or talked about by the writer of Hebrews. Hebrews chapter 13. Verses 13 through 16, and the King James Version reads, "Let us go forth, therefore, unto him without the camp, bearing his reproach. For here we have no continuing city, but we seek one to come. By him, therefore, let us offer the sacrifice of praise to God continually, that is, the fruit of our lips, giving thanks to his name. But to do good and to communicate, forget not. For with such sacrifices, God is well pleased." For here, back in 14, we have no continuing city, but we seek one to come. We seek one to come. The writer of Hebrews also described Abraham's faith in some of the most brilliant prose ever written. Hebrews chapter 11, verses 8 to 13. And the KJV reads, "By faith Abraham, when he was called to go out into a place which he should after receive for an inheritance, obeyed. And he went out, not knowing whither he went. By faith he sojourned in the land of promise as in a strange country, dwelling in tabernacles or tents with Isaac and Jacob, the heirs with him of the same promise. For he looked for a city which hath foundations, whose builder and maker is Elohim." Verse 11. "Through faith also Sarah herself received strength to conceive seed, and was delivered of a child when she was past age, because she judged him faithful who had promised." Verse 12. "Therefore sprang there even of one, and him as good as dead, so many as the stars of the sky in multitude, and as the sand which is by the seashore, innumerable. In verse 13, these all died in faith, not having received the promises, but having seen them afar off, and were persuaded of them, and embraced them, and confessed that they were strangers and pilgrims on the earth. This has to not only describe Avram and Sarai, but us. Describing us. Having not received the promises of the kingdom ahead, but having seen the kingdom ahead afar. And we're persuaded of the elements, the promises of that kingdom, and we embrace them, and we confess that we are strangers and pilgrims here on the earth. And we confess that we're strangers and pilgrims on the earth by our behavior, by how we carry ourselves, by how we talk, by how we walk, by how we think. And as far as faith is concerned, this is the level of trust we must also all aspire to. For this is the faith that our Master is returning to this earth to find, because he said in exasperation to his disciples in Luke chapter 18, verse 8, when the Son of Man cometh, shall he find faith in the earth? I contend that the tragedy that is modern day denominationalism and religiosity is the insistence that Torah and the whole of the Tanakh has been done away with and replaced by the writings of Paul and bolstered and unwritten by hyper grace, or I should say underwritten by hyper grace. This mindset is such that Torah, or let's just say Tanakh, is of no consequence to anyone's salvation. This is what they believe. But the truth of the matter is, my friends, that what we have embodied here within the Abrahamic Covenant is the plan of salvation, which denominationalism aspires to, embraces wholeheartedly. Without the Abrahamic Covenant, there is no plan of salvation. So how can you throw the Abrahamic Covenant away? The Abrahamic Covenant spells out Yah's plan of salvation. This is the very essence of what Abba meant when he told Abram that all of the clans of the earth through him would be blessed. Verse 3 of our chapter 12 reading. The Abrahamic Covenant, as well as the Mosaic, the Davidic, the renewed covenants, all are founded upon two essential elements, as I mentioned earlier, trusting faith and obedience. And without these elements, there is no covenant and no basis for salvation. The Abrahamic Covenant, in essence, holds the very key to Yah's plan of salvation. But this is seen only by those who possess eyes to see, ears to hear, and hearts and minds to receive and implement these eternal principles in their respective walk with Messiah, with Mashiach. That trusting obedience is the stimulus by which we receive Yah's blessings, Yah's goodness, Yah's eternal mercies, Yah's righteousness. Again, verse 3 of this 12th chapter of Genesis. I have to reflect on Abrams and the other patriarchs of our faith, whether these were spiritual superheroes. Were these people who were bigger than life? They could do no wrong. They were the quintessential prototype. And the answer is a resounding yes, but they were superheroes in a sense, but these were flawed superheroes. Flawed superheroes. In fact, these were no different than us. Each had their own individual issues that Abba was not at all hesitant to reveal to us in his word. Avram indeed had miraculous faith, if you ask me, but Avram also stumbled at times in his faith walk. Just within this Torah reading, we find that because he did not trust Yah to protect him during his sojourn in Mitzrayim, or Egypt, he coerced Sarai to essentially deny to the Egyptians that she was married to Avram, or that Avram was her husband. Later, Avram's faith also wavered. Avram's faith also wavered in him taking matters in his own hands, so to speak, to bear a promised son, not through his wife Sarai or Sarah, but through Sarah's handmaid Hagar. Avram's trusting faith, regardless, was legendary. There's no question about it. But regardless his couple faith missteps, Yah did not waver one tittle in his honoring of the covenant he made with Avram. Yah worked with what he had in Avram. And Yah took that faith, that mustard seed of faith that Avram had and operated in and walked in, and he multiplied it. Yah multiplied Avram's faith. And so Yah, under the auspices of the renewed covenant, expects nothing less from us, if you will. He expects Abrahamic level faith. Abrahamic level faith. Now, some of you may be saying to yourself, I don't have anything anywhere near this level of faith. The faith to pick up in my entire life and my family and head to an unknown place that Yah says he will show me. I don't have that level of faith that would take me to the very brink of carrying out the sacrifice of my only beloved as commanded by Yah and so forth. I don't have mountain moving faith. I don't have healing faith. I don't have raising the dead faith. And I will say something maybe shocking to some. That's okay. I don't possess those elevated levels of faithful obedience either. But I know Yah is working with me in that department. Oh, I have faith. But I'm so far away from the Abrahamic level of faith. The question is not whether we possess and exercise such a high level of faithful obedience today, but rather until we get to the Abraham level of faith, what do we do in the meantime with the little faith we have? Remember the man with the demon-oppressed child who said that he believed? He believed, but he said to Master, help my lack of faith. Increase my lack of faith. Do something to help me in my faith department. And I think where that dad was in turmoil over what he saw his son enduring, and he needed that extra boost in his level of faith, is where most of us find ourselves. If we're honest and transparent, we need to have Father give us that extra something to elevate and multiply that mustard seed of faith that we all have as a result. And that is part and parcel of our covenant relation faith, our covenant relationship with Jehovah. So what do we do in the meantime in order to increase our faith, to build our faith, because we're going to need it in the days ahead, my friends? We're going to need Abraham level faith. We're going to need patriarch level faith to make it through. Well, to begin with, we exercise and operate in the faithful obedience level we currently possess. That's the best place to start. And we'll find that it's not hard at all. Simply keep and honor Torah. Let's just start there. Keep the feast. Keep the weekly Sabbath. Eat clean. How about keep the moral laws? How about love Yah with our whole hearts, minds, and souls, and love our neighbors as ourselves? How about walk in covenant with Jehovah our Elohim? I tell you, if we simply focus on excelling in these fundamental elements of our faith, we will lay the groundwork from within for the Ruach Kodesh to broaden and deeper and expand our faith to that of an Avram and the other heroes of faith noted in Hebrews chapter 11. Indeed, many of us are being made to grow up and expand our faith maybe a little quicker than maybe we would feel comfortable with. You know, it's one thing to keep the instructions of righteousness, and to do the things I just mentioned, but it's an entirely different matter to stand toe to toe against the enemy and refuse to bow a knee to Baal. We've got many brethren out there today who are being coerced to do something that goes against their calling, that goes against who they are. And so those of us who are in those positions are finding ourselves having to step out in faith, greater faith than we possibly ever thought we would have to have. And to exercise faithful obedience that is on par with that of some of the biblical patriarchs. And we're able to do that because Yah steps in and aids us in building where we're lacking in our faith. And don't be fooled, beloved. What's happening right now to some of our dear brethren here in this nation and throughout the world may not be happening to us today, but as individuals today, it may not be happening to me. It may not be happening to you, but it's only a matter of time before the bad boys come a-calling for the rest of us. And we're all going to get our turn to stand toe to toe with the enemy and declare we will not take a knee to Baal. So it behooves us to step up our faithful obedience game. And I can't think of a better template for such a stepped up game than that which is recorded in 1 Thessalonians chapter 5. Beginning at verse 6 and reading through verse 23, the KJV reads, "Therefore let us not sleep, as do others, but let us watch and be sober. For they that sleep, sleep in the night, and they that be drunken are drunken in the night." Verse 8. "But let us, who are of the day, be sober, putting on the breastplate of faith and love, and for an helmet the hope of salvation." Verse 9. "For Yah hath not appointed us to wrath, but to obtain salvation by our Master Yehoshua Messiah." Verse 10. "Who died for us, that whether we wake or sleep, we should live together with him. Wherefore comfort yourselves together and edify one another, even as also you do." Verse 12. "And we beseech you, brethren, to know them which labor among you, and are over you in the Master, and admonish them, admonish you." Verse 13, "And to esteem them very highly in love for their works' sake, and be at peace among yourselves." Verse 14, "Now we exhort you, brethren, warn them that are unruly, comfort the feeble-minded, Support the weak. Be patient toward all men. Verse 15. See that none render evil for evil unto any man, but ever follow that which is good, both among yourselves and to all men. Verse 16. Rejoice evermore. Verse 17. Pray without ceasing. Verse 18. In everything give thanks, for this is the will of Elohim in Messiah Yeshua concerning you. 19. Quench not the spirit. 20. Despise not prophesyings. 21. Prove all things. Hold fast that which is good. 22. Abstain from all appearance of evil. And 23. And the very God, the very Elohim of peace, sanctify you wholly. And I pray, Elohim, your whole spirit and soul and body be preserved blameless unto the coming of our Master Yeshua Messiah. Beloved, when we honor Yah, He will honor us. So I say, hold on to your faith, come what may. And I give you, or I recommend to you, Proverbs chapter 3, verses 5 through 7. And the KJV reads, trust in Jehovah with all your heart, and lean not unto your own understanding. In all your ways acknowledge him, and he shall direct your paths. Be not wise in your own eyes, but fear Jehovah and depart from evil. And in addition to that, know that salvation comes to those who endure to the end through a faithful, obedient covenant relationship with the Almighty, as stated by our Master, Yehoshua Messiah, in Matthew chapter 24, verse 13. So my prayer for you this Sabbath is that you have an overcoming week and a meaningful and blessed Shabbat. And if you are keeping or observing Hanukkah, that you will have a meaningful Hanukkah season. And again, I would recommend that you, if you haven't already, check out that post when you get a chance, the one I did and posted a little earlier on Hanukkah. Truth or the traditions of the rabbis. But until next time, and as always, beloved, may you be most blessed, fellow saints in training. Take care.